Hi everyone, we are back for another amazing video here at Your Eggs. And this video is going to be focused on the egg donors. That's right, so many egg donors that we support. As you've heard, we've got an enormous database. And as a result of that, we're constantly talking to egg donors throughout the country and internationally about what they need in the process. They have many, many questions throughout this process. And one of the questions that most egg donors ask us, because they're just so unfamiliar with the process, is what's it all about, right? Like, how does it work? And at what stage do I have to go somewhere and do something? You know, there's all these questions, and it's really important for these donors, for all of you donors that are watching, to be supported properly, to understand the process in its entirety, so that you know at every step of the way what's going to happen. So that's what we're going to discuss in this video. And to help me do that, I have Dion here from Your Eggs, who's also going to help me explain that entire process. Thanks for joining, Dion.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, Dr. Sklar. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like when I think of the egg donation process, and when I have sat down and talked to you and other team members here at Your Eggs, the things that constantly come up, or the conversations that I hear amongst everyone, sometimes it's I overhear a conversation with an egg donor, and sometimes we're just kind of talking about it afterwards and debriefing. This idea of support. We all need support throughout our life for various reasons. And when someone's going through the egg donation process, it's, especially for the first time, it's so foreign and unfamiliar. They don't understand the terminology. They don't understand what's going on and the different steps. So how are the donors supported throughout that process, and what's the communication like from the Your Eggs team to them?
Yeah, no, this is such an important topic, and you know, the intended parents coming in have a pretty good idea of what's required. Many of them have already been through you know, an IVF cycle themselves, where the donors are often very unfamiliar. You know, they may just have heard from a friend who had gone through the process, or heard about it in the news, so they're not necessarily familiar with the steps. So it's really a top priority for us at Your Eggs to really help them completely understand before they get involved with it. So we do have some of our intake coordinators that work with the egg donors have done egg donation themselves.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is amazing, because then they're able to really support and communicate things really accurately, even, you know, including some of their own from, you know, first point of view, having gone through it. So, you know, it starts with, you know, we would start first with the pre-screening process, where there's really just going to be a big questionnaire, and they'll have an interview with one of our egg donor intake coordinators, and, you know, go over some medical history, and, you know, they would just explain the process, you know, to make sure that it is of interest to them and help them really understand, you know, the time commitment and the medical requirements of going through an egg retrieval process and being an egg donor for a couple.
Okay, and there are the donors assigned with someone that they can reach out to get information, understand, someone they can lean on, so some sort of either coordinator or manager of some sort?
Absolutely. So, you know, they'll first be working with an egg donor intake coordinator.
Okay.
And then, you know, they're usually able...
No, go ahead.
They're usually able to adequately answer their questions. We have had it where we've had some donors who've had some really specific medical questions that they wanted to ask even before coming in for any screening, any medical screening. And so we have set up some Zoom calls with a nurse practitioner or a nurse from our clinical team to help explain the process from a medical point of view before they even come in for any initial testing. You know, and the initial testing is pretty simple. And we can get into that a little bit.
And there's communication back and forth on a regular basis to inform them of the next steps and time frame and all of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The intake coordinators are available by either phone or email, and they usually do use both that as well as some Zoom calls to go over it in depth. They'll set up some Zoom meetings as well.
So they're assigned a coordinator from the beginning?
Yes.
Okay. And then they have a screening process. My understanding is there's multiple screening processes that they go through before they're like, yes, you're accepted, we can move forward?
Yes. Yes, and it can vary a little bit depending on, how quickly they may be picked by some intended parents. But frequently we'll have some initial pre-screening done even before they would be picked by some intended parents. And that might just involve some really basic hormone testing for them, like their anti-Müllerian hormone to look at the ovarian reserve. As well as maybe, some day 3 FSH and estradiol. So that could be done for them locally, so they wouldn't have to necessarily travel anywhere
for that,
just to get some initial testing. And then, once they are chosen by intended parents, then there'll be more testing, the genetic testing as well, which can be quite comprehensive, as well as, an ultrasound. So they'll definitely have more testing once they are chosen by intended parents, but there is some pre-screening that sometimes happens before they're chosen.
Awesome. So you've shared so many stories, wonderful, beautiful, like heartwarming success stories from couples using egg donors in the past. From those stories and from working in the fertility world, I know that there are 2 different paths that often a donor can take when they're being put through or they decide to donate their eggs. And so there is the path of someone calling the agency and saying, I'd like to donate my eggs and just have them ready for someone to use when they want, and those eggs would be frozen.
Right.
And then there's others who are like, I want to donate my eggs, but I want to make sure it goes to a great family who really needs it. And so that individual would be kind of coordinated differently because they're not donating eggs in advance that are frozen. They're going to do a fresh cycle with their eggs once they're selected by intended parents and a couple. How is that process? Can you walk us through the process so if someone's thinking about donating their eggs, they know that these 2 paths are a little bit different?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when an egg donor, when they're waiting to be selected by intended parents, it could take a little while. Sometimes it can happen right away, and then other times it could be several months later that they might be chosen by some intended parents. And then, they might be traveling to where those intended parents are located because they may already have an established relationship with a fertility center in their area, which, we really welcome. We love to meet new fertility centers if we're not already working with them. And then their donor would come into their fertility center to do the screening, in which she would also gain a lot of information about her fertility and all of her health and genetics that she would also have access to, as well as the intended parents before she goes through the cycle. So that would be a little bit different. It can be a longer wait. You don't know the exact timing compared to if somebody was going to donate their eggs and then they were selected to be added into our frozen donor database.
Okay.
And then that could start right away. And our facility is here in San Diego. So then they would be doing that here in San Diego.
Got it. And then those eggs would be put into, obviously frozen and storage and then put into the database. So if a couple was looking and they found this donor, they can get started a little bit sooner as well because those eggs are already frozen.
Right. Exactly.
Got it.
Which is why some people do like to go the frozen donor database route because it can be instantaneous instead of having to coordinate with the egg donor and set up a cycle.
Got it.
For them.
And I know that Your Eggs works with, a plethora of clinics throughout the country and the world, and you have different relationships with some of those clinics. Does that change the process for the donor in any way with the clinics that you're already established with and working with, those affiliate clinics versus clinics that you're not?
Yeah. Not too much really, because we would quickly establish a relationship with them, and we do absolutely love it when intended parents will come from a new center as well as when they come from one of the centers we're already working with, and then what would happen is the donor would then go to that facility, and it would be a new facility. So one of our coordinators would be helping to coordinate the entire process with with our egg donor. With that fertility center and getting them scheduled for their appointments. And just so egg donors know, there's the initial screening, but then the time that they need to travel longer for is the actual stimulation process, which again would take place, and if the IPs chose them and already had a fertility clinic, it would take place at that location. So they might be traveling, for the egg retrieval part, which could be 10 to 14 days. Okay.
And in that situation, when they're working with an intended parents, who's already working with a clinic, they would have two coordinators, a coordinator here
Yes.
at Your Eggs and then a coordinator at the IVF clinic.
Right. They would be working with a third-party IVF coordinator at the IVF clinic of the intended parent's choosing.
Okay.
And then they would have the coordinator from Your Eggs who's going to help facilitate everything, call them with reminders, make sure that if they do need to travel, all their arrangements are made for them, and they would be bringing a +1 with them. They can bring a friend or a family member to support them throughout the process so they're not alone.
Awesome. So let's just say regardless of the path that's chosen, they're just donating their eggs to be frozen, or they're working with a couple to retrieve eggs and fertilize them and create embryos. At either one of those, you already mentioned it, they have to go through a stimulation process to stimulate the ovaries to produce those eggs. You alluded to it. It's about 14 days?
Yeah, can be up to 2 weeks.
Okay.
And there are some injectable medications that they would be using during that time.
So
as
that's
well.
the time they start the medication,
Yes.
and that's the time where they're more engaged in the process.
Yes, that is the most time-intensive part of egg donation is the stimulation process.
Okay. And then once those the ovaries are ready and the eggs are mature to be taken out, can you talk about the retrieval process?
Yeah, so again, it would be, at the fertility center where the IPs chose, or, if they were going through a frozen one, it would be here in San Diego. And then they would, go through that, and anesthesia is used during that process. So they would, have a friend with them to drive them home. We have had cases where people haven't had a friend at our San Diego center, and then we have had our third-party coordinator would be the one that would drive them home.
Okay.
So, just making sure that they're taken care of at every point along the way. Many people do go back to work the following day, but other people will take 2 days off.
Okay, so recovery could vary.
It can vary a little bit person to person. Many people feel better the next day, but some people need a little more rest and can rest for a couple days.
Okay. One of the most common concerns that I hear when I speak to egg donors, and we've had these conversations, and their biggest concern that I hear, and I get it, it's understandable, is this concern of, well, if I'm donating my eggs, and sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes if they're stimulating, they could produce 10 eggs, they could produce 20 eggs, they could produce 30 eggs, depending on how they're stimulated, how young they are, and so forth. There's always this concern that they're losing all their eggs and that their fertility is going to be compromised. And I feel for them because I understand as egg donors watching, it's a valid question, right? Like, is something going to happen to my health, my fertility, my ovaries, because I'm giving these eggs to somebody else?
Right.
Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it can best be described as, every month the body's naturally going to be reabsorbing any eggs for a female that aren't being retrieved or used naturally. So those eggs are naturally going to be, they're going to be losing them every month, whether they're doing egg retrieval or not doing an egg retrieval. So it doesn't really affect their long-term fertility in any way. It's just that particular month that they're going through retrieval that those eggs would be retrieved. So donating eggs doesn't reduce a woman's overall, egg supply, and it shouldn't affect her ability to conceive later. And in addition, they're going to gain a lot of fertility information that will help them be able to plan for their future fertility as well and family planning.
And at Your Eggs, is there any, also, I guess, benefit for these donors to donate their eggs?
So, there's always a lot of people really enjoy finding out their genetic information, finding out their ovarian reserve, and having these examinations and having all of that knowledge. I think that's a great benefit, and people talk about it being a really positive experience, both from the information that they're gaining about themselves, as well as the opportunity to help a couple, and many people who went into it maybe more for the monetary compensation, end up saying that they were so happy that they did it for the emotional reward that they felt afterwards, from like a letter or, hearing about the intended parents and what it means to them. We do, in addition to that, we hear that from a lot of egg donors, which is so heartwarming. We do, if some egg donors would also like to freeze their eggs, we do have the opportunity, that we offer to intended parents that they could do like a split cycle.
Okay.
And then, and this would be if people's eggs were made, or if people's eggs were going straight into the frozen database, they could have the opportunity to do a split cycle and keep some eggs for themselves as well for their future. If they're thinking, I want to go to law school or medical school or something first, and I don't know when I'll be having kids,
Sure.
it could be way in the future. I'd like to freeze some eggs as well. So there could be that opportunity available in some cases.
Awesome. That's great. That's a great, added benefit to the whole process.
Yeah.
So, I think the biggest message that I want donors to take out of this is, it's a process, but the process, you're going to be supported throughout the entire process. We're going to hold your hands here. Our team at Your Eggs is going to hold your hand through the process to make sure you get through it properly, safely, in the way that's best suited for you. It's not just about your eggs. We care for every individual that we support, whether it's the intended parents, the couples, or the donor. We want to make sure that everyone goes through this through this process safely and in a healthy way and feels supported throughout that process. So that's one of the bigger things that I take away from it. I also want to assure everyone, as Dion just said, that as an egg donor, your fertility is not compromised in any way. Just because you're donating your eggs doesn't mean that that's going to negatively impact your fertility along the way, and that's definitely a concern that we hear. So we want to assure everyone that that your fertility is still safe moving through this process as you find a family of your own and try to create a family of your own. So thanks so much, Dion, for joining us and sharing that information. Thank you all for watching. I hope you found this valuable. If you have any questions about the egg donation process or you want to be an egg donor, you can leave those questions down below. You can also reach out to us by going to our website at youreggs.com, and one of our coordinators will reach back out to you to make sure you get all your questions answered. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not already a subscriber to our YouTube channel, please make sure you hit that bell to subscribe and get notified when we put out another video for all of you. And we will see you in the next video.